Before we start the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. And now, let's go. Story 1. I don't remember much about living with both of my parents. My very first memory is that of my mother sitting in a sun chair on the front porch, listening to the radio, napping behind her wide sunglasses. I was sitting next to her with a pink Dino plushie, quietly playing. I would look up at her, and she'd be so still, as if paralyzed by the sun. I remember imagining her never moving again, that she would stay in that chair forever, never play with me. But as soon as I felt that sad little tug in my heart, she'd rustle from her sleep and comfort me. She was right there. Everything was okay. For now, I don't remember their separation or why it happened. I was very young. My mother was moving out, and they decided I was to stay with my dad. There was never a big fight. No screaming. Just 4 large suitcases loaded into a red Toyota, a kiss on the cheek, and a wave goodbye. That was it. Like she was going to the store. I was too young to understand, but I knew I should be sad. I could feel it. She wanted to visit, but she lived on the other side of the country. She would send me postcards and presents, but I didn't get to see her. My father met a new woman, and while I wouldn't call her mom, she turned into it in everything but name. It's just how these stories go sometimes. But things are rarely so simple. I learned the year I turned 12. My father passed away in an accident. They pulled me out of school to tell me, and it felt like falling into a nightmare. You start to question everything. Every sensation becomes unreal as you look for anything to convince you it's a dream. I couldn't fathom it. After that, things went fast. My stepmother fought to get custody of me, but we didn't have the papers. I wasn't technically adopted. We talked about it, but we never went through with it. As such, the next in line to care for me was my biological mother on the other side of the country. They contacted her, fully expecting her to relinquish custody. But that's not what happened. She said yes. So I was pulled out of school, had my room packed up, and sent across the country. Wyoming to Florida. By the time I got there, I was still in a daze. It had all gone by so fast, and I had a hard time adjusting. It was one thing being told that everyone loves you and wants to care for you, but it's another feeling entirely when you see your life being put into boxes. You get some perspective, and it's a strange perspective to grasp at that age. The first thing I saw when I arrived at my mother's house near Crystal River was a sun chair. Not the same one she'd had back at our house when I was little, but the same kind. There was also a little table with a battery-powered radio and an ashtray. I didn't remember that she smoked, but then again, I barely remembered her at all. When she came running out of the house, it was hard to see her as Mom. To me, she was just Aileen. Even with the sunglasses and the outstretched arms, she looked nothing like I remembered her. Still, she swept me up, kissed me, and assured me. "It's going to be okay, baby girl," she sobbed. "It's all going to be okay." It was an old house, much older than the one we'd lived in. 2 floors. Every room had these wooden panels that looked like they'd topple over from a stiff breeze. It was clean and well-kept, but there were certain spots and corners that had a slight tinge of mildew. Lots of pictures on the walls, mostly of herself, but a few of me and Dad as well. No other men, it seemed. A couple of friends, perhaps. "We're going to have so much fun," she assured me. "I'll show you all around town. You know you can swim with manatees here?" "Yeah," I said. "Read it in an article." "Well, ain't that exciting, huh?" She showed me my room, talking about everything and nothing. I could tell she was nervous, but I couldn't fault her for trying to keep a straight face. She could probably tell I wasn't okay. Then again, would I ever be? Those first few days are a blur. I had a room with a nice bed. She helped me put up my posters and connect my laptop to the internet. It was just a shitty wireless connection, but it was better than nothing. We didn't get great reception out there. Something about being too close to the coast. It wasn't really the middle of nowhere. There was a pretty lively neighborhood, but it wasn't the most modern area. Aileen was happy to show me around. She introduced me to everyone, waving happily, and tried to make me feel welcome. She would ask me about everything from favorite subjects in school to favorite music. We would go to the movies, we would hang out at the park, go swimming, all kinds of stuff. But it all just felt hollow in a way, like it wasn't real life. School was different too. I mean, it had to be. It was a new class with new people. It couldn't be the same. And being new is a coin flip. You're either everyone's favorite or a social pariah. I ended up somehow as both. I remember coming home one day after living with Aileen for about a month. I was tired. I've been spending some time with some new friends I met in English class, while dodging some catty know-it-alls who kept bugging me during lunch. It was a social minefield, and coming home to my safe space felt like recharging a battery. I put on some music and danced around the room. But after only a couple of seconds, a picture on the wall came down. A framed photo of me and Mom from when I was small. It crashed onto the floor, but the glass didn't break. I jumped, almost dropped my headphones, and settled down. I carefully hung it back up on the nail and stepped away. I must have moved too much. The house was old, and I kept forgetting that. As I turned back to my laptop, the picture fell again. This time I was barely moving at all. I put the picture up a third time and looked closely. I didn't move. As I looked, I saw the nail in the wall being pushed out. And for a third time, the picture came crashing onto the floor. This time the glass broke. I didn't know what to make of it. Maybe there was mold or something behind the wallpaper. I couldn't smell anything, even when I put my face next to it, but it could be a dozen things. All my other pictures were fine, though. It was just this one. Strange. I had Aileen put up a screw instead that seemed to hold. But that incident made me keep my eyes open, and I started to notice other things around the house. For example, if you went into the basement, you could hear this strange pitter-patter behind the dryer. I figured it was rats, but it seemed a little too clean. Besides, Aileen had never mentioned there being rats, and she talked a lot. But I tried my best not to think of it. An old house makes noise. That's nothing new. I wasn't living in a ghost story. No one is. But then there was the pantry. The kitchen had an old sort of walk-in pantry for storing dry goods. It was more like a closet, if anything. Aileen used it to store things for her baking. She rarely used it, and I rarely left my room, but the few times I went down to the kitchen, I'd grab a handful of almonds or some raisins for a quick snack. And every now and then, I'd hear something. Sometimes it'd sound like a closing door, other times it'd be a quick tap on the wall. This one time, a bag of flour flew off the shelf as I opened the door. Sometimes I'd just stay and listen, and when I did, I could almost always hear something on the other side. Something moving, crinkling paper bags, a rasping, like something heavy being dragged against hollow wood. I mentioned this to Aileen during one of our dinners. She made pasta carbonara. I think you got rats or something, I said. Rats? She chuckled. There's no rats. Well, you got something, I said. In there. I nodded at the pantry. She frowned a little and went over to check, turning over a couple of bags and a sack of potatoes. I don't see anything, she said. You sure? You gotta listen, I said. You don't see it, you hear it. I'll have to take your word for it. We finished dinner in silence, but I could tell this bothered her. She kept looking over at the pantry every now and then, as if waiting for it to expose itself. She would keep doing this on and off for the next few days. I'd see her standing in the kitchen, still as a statue, listening. She'd shush me if I got too close. I heard it, she'd tell me. I swear I heard it. At least I wasn't the only one. But Aileen was taking it much harder than I was. For me, it was just a bit weird, and I figured she'd call the exterminator, but she was taking it in her own hands. She couldn't have something destroy her picture-perfect future with her estranged daughter, after all. So her newfound obsession turned from a strange quirk to downright invasive. After about a week, she was fed up and had begun breaking wood panels in the pantry to check the wall. She was convinced there was some kind of burrow hidden behind it, but she didn't find anything. Aileen would rip out the entire pantry, leaving items on the kitchen table. I'd have nowhere to sit for dinner, so I started eating in my room. I'd hear her go crazy downstairs with power tools, ripping into the wall. It'd make the entire house shake. Now, pictures were falling off the walls, and I couldn't tell if it was from the house or from Aileen. Then one day, as I got home from school, she met me in the hall. She had these big safety goggles on, and her eyes were going wide. I found it, she said. Come on, I'll show you. I just got to put this away. No, she insisted. It'll just take a second. She took me by the arm. I pulled away, giving her a cold look. I want to put this away, I repeated. She looked me up and down. Then she took a deep breath and nodded. All right, just hurry. She'd torn out the back wall of the pantry and taken down the shelves. Turns out the back wall was just a thin wooden layer, some insulation, and then a hollow space. It was about 2 feet wide and went through most of the walls. I think they skimped on insulation when they built this place, she said. Something's hiding up there. I told you. Rats. It's not rats, she snapped at me, slamming her fist into the wall. My heart skipped a beat as I stepped back. She was breathing heavily. She wasn't blinking. I'm not telling you again, she continued. There are no rats. There have never been rats. This is a good house. Okay, fine, I mumbled. It's not rats. She didn't say anything. She just adjusted her safety goggles, picked up her cordless saw, and got back to it. I ended up staying in my room more often than not. Aileen kept working on the downstairs bathroom, tearing up the tiled floor to check underneath. Of course, she didn't find anything. Every day, she'd suggest something new. Maybe there were raccoons, possums, maybe snakes. Looking deep enough under the floor, she even found that they'd been insulated with old newspapers and sacks of dry grass and blue sunflowers. Something regional, I guess. Aileen was furious. For all the years I've lived here, I've never had these problems, she said. I don't know why it's starting now. It doesn't make sense. It's not a big deal, I assured her. It's probably nothing. But it's not nothing though, is it? It's something. We both heard it. Yeah, but who cares? You're tearing up the house. Better me than them. We barely talked for a whole week. She would still help me around the house when she could, but as soon as the bare necessities were out of the way, she'd go back to tearing up the floor. She tried using traps and poison, but wouldn't catch anything. One day, I found her sitting on a pile of debris in the hallway. She was exhausted. She had dark circles under her eyes. I felt a bit sorry for her, so I sat down on the staircase to keep her company. You should give it a rest, I said. Not like give up. Just take a break. I'm good, she panted. Just give me a sec. Don't you ever use that sunshare anymore? I asked. You used to love those. The what? The sunshare, I said. The one out front. She looked at me for a while, not understanding what I was saying. Then something clicked. Right that, she said. I don't really use that. Why not? What kind of life is that, just lounging around, waiting for something to happen? And with that, she got up on her feet. She turned to me, power tool in hand. She was making a point. Sometimes you gotta do something. The next time the picture of her and me fell from my wall, I didn't bother putting it back up. There was no point. It would keep falling over and over again anyway. I just had to accept that my life was full of whirring, chopping, and clanking. I still barely knew the woman I lived with, and I was supposed to accept whatever nonsense she came up with. But one day when I came home, she wasn't chopping up the floor anymore. Instead, she was sitting on the stairs leading up to the front door, holding a bucket. And for the first time in weeks, Aileen looked satisfied. When I came up to her, she tapped the side of the bucket. Check it, she said. Told you it wasn't rats. Cane toads. About 24 of them in total. One of them hopped out of the pantry, she continued. I had to check around the basement, but they'd made a sort of nest around an old pipe. So that's it? I asked. You got 'em all? Sure did, she laughed. And I plugged up their nest. So we're done. We're done. She swept me up in a hug and kissed me on the side of the head. I felt so relieved. Maybe she could be normal again. Aileen talked about bringing in a carpenter to fix the problems she'd found while breaking open the walls. Meanwhile, she settled on hastily assembling a couple of plywood pieces. We would have to use the upstairs shower for a while to avoid water damage. She eventually returned to her usual cheery self. I'd see her dancing around the kitchen to hits from the 90s. We made our own scones one weekend, and not long after that, she returned to work. She'd taken some time off to get me set up, but now she was getting more confident. She worked as a county recorder, so she usually sat at a desk all day or in long-winded meetings. It was nice not having to worry about her anymore. I could focus on just keeping my newfound social life alive. In that age, that's easier said than done. One day, I came home talking on the phone with a friend from school. We were discussing a group English assignment and how we were supposed to motivate a slacker to contribute. It was nice to talk to someone who despised group projects as much as I did. I threw my backpack on my bed, turned around, and stopped. The picture on the wall was back up. Now, I knew for a fact I hadn't put it back up there. I also knew cane toads weren't to blame, so it had to be Aileen. But a part of me kept thinking, what if it wasn't? I agonized over this for a while. If it wasn't Aileen, it must have been someone else. But did I want to bring that to her attention? I'd seen the way she got upset over a couple of cane toads. Who knew what she'd do if she suspected an actual intruder? I decided it was better to keep quiet and to keep an ear to the ground. Despite Eileen's best efforts, things weren't as simple as a couple of toads poking around in the basement. Things were still moving in the pantry. I'd still hear something push against the wood panels. And at times, I'd see pictures move on their own. But I kept my mouth shut. Aileen was like a different person. She was cheerful, motivated, and curious. We'd talk about my day, take turns buying groceries, and make all kinds of plans together. I was allowed to come and go freely as long as she could keep tabs on me. Typical mom stuff, but I'd still see the little things around the house. Once, I even moved a picture myself, and when I came back, it was fixed, straightened, and Aileen had been gone all day. I would test this a little further each day. I'd place things around the house and take pictures with my phone. Later, I'd compare them to see if anything changed. Sometimes they did. For example, pictures were straightened. A couple of cans in the pantry were rearranged to have the labels pointing outward. A few candle holders on a dresser downstairs were fixed to be the same height. Little pointless things. I think the most noticeable thing was my stuffed animals. I only had a few from my old house, and I kept them on a chair in the corner. They were rearranged to always face outward. I didn't do that, but it wasn't clear how this was happening or why. And I didn't want to bring it up with Aileen. Maybe she was doing it to mess with me as a test. I decided to unpack my final box. I had been putting it off since it was mostly nostalgic stuff, but I figured it was time to bite the bullet. Pictures of Dad and my stepmom, little trinkets and doodads, and of course my old pink dinosaur plushie. I'd had it since I was a baby. Dad used to say it was the first thing anyone gave me. As I walked around the room, putting it all up, Aileen walked in. She helped me rearrange some things, made some small talk, and finally picked up the Dino plushie. "Well, isn't this a handsome fellow?" she said. "What's his name?" It was such a strange question. It didn't have a name. She should have known that. Then again, it had been a while, but I decided to mess with her. "Don't you remember?" I said. "It's Kenny." "Right, Kenny," she nodded. "Glad to see he's still around." She was probably just trying to make me feel at home, still, but it was weird. She was lying. It made me question what else she might be lying about. It didn't take Aileen that long to notice I was up to something. She noticed me taking pictures and rearranging things. It was her house, after all. She, if anyone, would notice if something was different. So one day, as we sat down for dinner, she put her hand on my phone. "I need you to tell me what you're doing," she said. "Don't think I haven't noticed." "I don't know," I lied. "I'm just getting used to the place." "There's more to it," she insisted. "I've seen what you do with the paintings and the photos. I'm just fixing them." "No, you're not." She looked me dead in the eye, and I could see that spark, just like when I was tearing out the pantry. That flame. There was no point in lying to her. "I'm not moving them, but something is." I told her what I'd noticed. I showed her the before and after pictures. And as soon as she realized this wasn't a cane toad problem anymore, she got up from the table, locked the doors, and fetched her toolbox. "We're not leaving this house until we deal with this." "Can we just call someone?" I asked. "What's the big deal?" "No, we can't," Aileen said. "We're dealing with this." "I'm dealing with this." "Well, I'm going to go ahead and call someone." She snatched the phone from my hands, stepped into the pantry, and dropped it into the space between the walls. Before I could protest, she had her hand up in a shush. "This is serious," she said, "and we need to deal with this." This time, she wasn't taking any half measures. She was tearing out walls, calling out to whatever intruder she'd imagined. She'd wake up at random times in the night, silently walking around the house, watching. She'd keep my bedroom door locked to make sure there were no distractions. Then, she got a gun. Maybe she'd always had one, but now she walked around with it. Her reasoning was, there was an intruder, and she needed to defend us. She would deal with this one way or the other. And until she did, I wasn't allowed to leave. "They could take you when you leave. Whenever you're out of sight," she'd say. I can't take that risk. So for days on end, there'd be no internet, no phone, nothing but power tools and random shouts. Threats, smacks, screams, all directed at this invisible foe. And yet, at night, little things would change, but never in a way that Aileen would notice. Then, one morning, I woke up to this strange sound, a little vibration. I looked to the side, only to find my cell phone laying on the nightstand. It was a bit dirty, and it had a crack in the corner, but it was functional. I thought that maybe Aileen was done, and that this was a peace offering. I walked into the hallway, only to see her using a screwdriver to remove an outlet from the wall. I quickly hid the phone behind my back, but I was a bit too quick on the draw. It slipped out of my hand and sailed across the floor into my room. Aileen looked up. What was that? I couldn't make up an excuse fast enough. She got up and pushed past me, almost launching me down the stairs. She picked up the phone from the floor and looked at me with disbelief. Are you messing with me? She asked. Is this a joke to you? No, I said. It was just there. I am your mother, she bellowed. You don't lie to me like this. You mean like you lied about Kenny? She shook her head and frowned. Kenny, she asked. The dinosaur. I snapped back. He doesn't have a name, but you keep pretending. Do you remember anything about me? And I confronted her. I asked about where I was born. I asked about my middle name. I asked about my dad, our first vacation, our first car. A couple of things she could answer, a couple of them she couldn't. Maybe she was too surprised to think clearly. You used to lay in your sun chair on the front porch, I said. What did you used to drink when you did? This is ridiculous. You drank your favorite drink every time you went out. What was it? Campari and orange juice, she sighed. That's my favorite drink. I get that all the time. Wrong. You never drank while watching me. You never once did. We just looked at one another. A couple of uneasy thoughts crossed my mind. Maybe she wasn't my mom. I headed for the stairs. She was right behind me, wielding the screwdriver like a knife. She asked me to stop, but I kept going. I headed straight for the front door, but she'd locked and bolted it. I got it open, but not fast enough. She caught up to me and slammed the door shut, leaning over me. Her faces were inches away from mine. You'll have to wait in the basement while I fix this, she panted. Don't make a fuss. You're not my mom, are you? She didn't respond. She just grabbed my arm and led me downstairs. I didn't even know the basement door had a lock, but turns out it did. It was just me, a washer, a dryer, and old boxes. Nothing important, mostly just holiday stuff. Christmas, Thanksgiving, for carrot, th of July. I stayed down there all day, hearing Aileen tear the place apart. She couldn't let go. No matter what, she was going to have her perfect house and her perfect daughter. Nothing was supposed to go wrong, but somehow it had. Maybe she thought I would forget about the whole thing if she just finished up quickly. Hell, maybe she was planning on getting me something really, really nice. But I couldn't let go of that one thought. That maybe Aileen wasn't my actual mom. Maybe she was just some woman living here. But she had the pictures. There was mail addressed to her from years back in the basement boxes. I couldn't make sense of it. So I waited for hours. Eileen's frustration grew louder and violent. I could hear her throw things, knock over furniture, and yell at the walls. Asterisk, what do you want? Asterisk, she'd scream. Asterisk, who are you? Asterisk, she was still using her power tools. Cutting into the walls, into the furniture. I could hear something falling apart, something thumping down the stairs. And with every crash, Aileen would get angrier, until finally she would break down crying hysterically in the hallway above. I tried not to listen. I had no idea what she was capable of anymore. So instead, I brought out one of the old boxes and browsed. Old bills, newspaper cancellations, birthday cards, all kinds of everyday things. I didn't even bother to read most of them. They were all addressed to Aileen, and there was nothing more to it. Little bits and bobs of a life well lived. I stopped at a couple of birthday cards. There were a couple for me. I sent her one on her 40-carat th birthday, and it was there. There were invitations to weddings, Christmas cards, well wishes. Even a couple of get-well cards from when she had her appendix taken out. But underneath, I find something strange. A custom print. Good luck on the move, one card said. We'll miss you. I turned it over. 3 friends looking into the camera. 2 looking sarcastically sad, and a 3rd woman rolling her eyes. Addressed a couple of years ago. But the woman in the middle, the one it was clearly addressed to, wasn't Aileen. It was a stranger. A stranger holding a fruity drink, and who had the same eyes as me. The Aileen I knew was off to the side. A friend. The card was signed Bella and Laura. The woman on the right was Laura, not Aileen. I dropped the card on the floor and looked up. I was in a stranger's house. Someone who'd known my real mother and taken her place. And that person was freaking out upstairs, armed with power tools. I had no idea how much danger I was in, but I could feel it. My body tensed up. Every breath felt colder, sharper. My legs grew restless, getting ready to run. I had to do something. I put the box back on a shelf. She didn't need to know that I knew. I looked for a tool, something to pop the door open with. But there was nothing. She'd made sure of that. I thought maybe I could break open something from the washer and use it as a lockpick or something. Anything. But the door popped open. Pop Aileen didn't do that. No one did. It was just open. I walked up the stairs, carefully looking out. Aileen was moving around upstairs. It couldn't have been her. I opened the door, took a few steps outside, and headed for the front door. Then, the floor creaked. I stopped and held my breath. Then, footsteps. Aileen came running down the stairs. I threw myself on the front door, and this time I got it open in time. I was out, running across the front lawn. Wet grass tangled between my toes. I headed for the closest neighbor, screaming at the top of my lungs. I saw a door open across the street. Then I heard a gunshot. I dropped to the ground, covering my head. The neighbor screamed and hurried back inside. Aileen, or Laura, had pulled out her handgun. She'd fired a warning shot. She grabbed me by the arm and pulled me back inside, still holding the gun. Perfectly cut grass stuck to my face as I was dragged past the forgotten sun chair. "I live here now," she yelled through gritted teeth. She moved. "I live here now. You don't get to pick your mom." She pulled me back inside and locked the door. She took me upstairs into my bedroom and locked that door too. We sat down across from each other on the floor, with her gun casually pointed my way. We stayed there for a couple of minutes, just looking at each other. Two strangers sharing a house. She looked different in the dark. I could see it now. "I wanted to make things perfect," she sighed. "It was supposed to be different this time. Aileen was supposed to be different. What did you do to her?" She shook her head. "She moved. I just didn't file the papers." Of course. She worked at the county records. Eileen's official address was still registered here. So when they looked her up, they reached Laura, still living there. And she just went for it. "If I could get you, I could get anyone," she continued. "Then I'd really be her. And not, well, me." She picked up the pink dinosaur plushie and casually tossed it aside. She was done pretending. And with that, she raised the handgun. "I have to try again," she murmured. "I'm sorry. Don't do this." "What choice do I have?" she asked. "Would you like to be me?" I didn't answer. She shook her head again. "Didn't think so." My tongue felt dry. A sting of salt burned my eye from a cold sweat. I didn't know whether to throw myself at her or shield my face. Instead, I did nothing. My forehead felt cold, as if anticipating a bullet. She tensed her trigger finger, but nothing happened. See, there's this thing about old houses. The shadows seem a little longer. There are noises coming out of every corner. 9 times out of 10, it's just the wind. A poorly constructed wall. Or hell, maybe a cane toad. But this shadow had been different. Shadows don't fix pictures on the walls. They don't raid your pantry. And they don't put back the one picture you have of your real mom on the wall, as if trying to show you when you're being lied to. And they certainly don't put a long, dark, bone-like finger in the way of a trigger. But this one did. It emerged from the wallpaper, a solid shade of chromatic dark, leaning over Laura like a misshapen shadow. Taller, longer, slimmer. At least 7 feet tall, but hunched over into a ball. It had put a long, dark finger in the way of the trigger, stopping Laura from pulling it. Her breathing quickened. She tried to push, but nothing happened. She struggled and strained, trying with 2 hands, but nothing. Instead, a second hand grasped the back of her head and smashed her straight forward into the floor. I'd never seen anything so violent. One forceful smack, and she'd lost all her front teeth, broken her nose, and cracked part of her forehead. It left a blood-tufted dent on the wooden floor. The thing stopped for a moment, giving Laura a chance to gasp for air. As she did, it turned to the pink dinosaur plushie and put it back on the drawer facing outward. Even now, it couldn't stop itself from making things right. Maybe that was the point all along, to set things right. Labels out. Pictures straight. No lies. In one swift motion, it stood up, dragging Laura along like a hapless ventriloquist puppet. It slammed the bedroom door open with its shoulder, knocking it off its hinges, clattering to the floor. Laura kicked and screamed, kicking and slapping candle holders, chairs, and photos as she went. I looked down the hallway, only to see them disappear into the bathroom. Laura couldn't form a sentence anymore, but kept making this pleading moan. Even from a distance, you could hear her spitting up teeth. But the bathroom door closed. There were screams, a mirror being broken, thumping over and over as a body was beaten into a pulp, bone against ceramic tiles, flesh crushed into paste. I didn't even notice the sirens outside. The neighbors had called the police. I didn't notice them breaking down the front door or coming up the stairs. But when they did, they bore witness to the same thing I did. Laura and something else locked in the bathroom. There was a final shriek cut short as Laura was thrown out of the second-story bathroom window. I was wrapped in a blanket and taken out on the lawn. An officer held a hand up, asking me not to look. My shaking hands looked weird in the blue and red light. The neighbors were peeking out their front door again, and no one could explain what had happened in that bathroom. And in the days that followed, no one could explain why all the chairs, photos, and candle holders had been put back in their rightful place overnight. After that, things went by fast. Laura had willingly committed a clerical error to service her elaborate identity theft, and things were corrected. My biological mother flew down from Nashville, where she'd moved about 1.5 years prior. A couple of her boxes had gotten lost in the move, and she'd been fighting to get her paperwork in order. Apparently, it was as if someone had been actively fighting her efforts. Imagine that. Moving in with her is another story in itself, a rather mundane one. But she still lounged in her sun chair, listening to the radio. She had her favorite drink on the weekends, and she knew that my pink dinosaur plushie didn't need a name to be my favorite thing. It wasn't much, but it was real. Today, I'm 27 years old. A couple of years ago, I moved back to that little community outside Crystal River. I bought that same house for myself and painstakingly fixed it up over 2 drawn-out summers. It was cheap, but a lot of work. Some people would question why I'd ever want to go back there, but I can't see myself living anywhere else. Yes, it was traumatic, but that wasn't the house's fault. That was Laura. No, this is a house of little creaks and nudges, of long shadows, of cane toads in the yard, and pictures I don't bother to straighten. And I'd rather live in a crooked home than a perfect hell. Story 2. We met where all cursed love stories start, modding a horror subreddit. The sub was called r/home to Peshore, small, niche, focused on analog horror, lost media, and old VHS tapes people claimed they found in the woods or in boxes labeled Do Not Watch. Most were fake, but the effort behind them? Impressive. We'd sticky the best ones, ban low-effort, creepypasta LARPs, and message each other long into the night about the videos that actually felt wrong. That's how I got to know Zara. Her username was at Caller. Zara? She lived in Boston. Graphic designer and writer. Obsessed with glitch effects and typography. She always had this way of writing that felt offbeat. Her messages were full of parentheses and dashes and late-night thoughts that lingered too long. She'd send me short videos, her walking through snow, her hands shaking as she filmed flickering streetlights. Nothing performative, just raw. I live in Asheville. We never met in person, but it didn't matter. We talked every day, texted before bed. She sent me voice memos and videos when she couldn't sleep, softly whispering about dreams she'd had where faces were smooth like porcelain or people only existed when being watched. Sometimes we FaceTimed. She always kept her room dark, lit only by the blue light of her screen. The connection felt real, so real I started making plans, looking up flights. She even joked she'd move south if she could find a job that didn't chain her to a Boston office. Then, without warning, she vanished. No volvió. No explicación. Just silence. I thought maybe something had happened, an accident, a family emergency. But her Reddit account was gone, deleted. Same with her Discord. Every photo she'd sent me disappeared from my phone. Even our saved chats were empty. Just blank message bubbles with no text. I tried to retrace her online presence, but there was nothing. No LinkedIn, no Instagram, no cached posts. It was like I'd been texting a ghost. I still had one thing left, a backup folder. I'd saved a few of her videos there. One was my favorite, just her walking past an old church at night, humming some off-key lullaby. When I opened it, it wasn't her. It was me, not filming, not reacting, just sitting. Alone. In my room. Eyes wide open. Blank. Staring at the camera like I'd been caught mid-blink. The file metadata said it had been recorded 3 days ago. At 3:03 a.m. I don't remember that. I didn't sleep for days. I became obsessed with proving she was real. I texted an old co-worker she'd once mentioned. He didn't know who I was talking about. I even emailed the subreddit admins asking if they could restore old mod logs. They said there was no record of a mod named Call Her Zura. I posted on our /askreddit. Just a simple question. Anyone remember a user named callher.zura? The post vanished in seconds. Not removed, just gone. The next day, I woke up to a package on my doorstep. No address. No stamp. Inside was a VHS tape labeled Cut 23. I don't own a VHS player, but my neighbor does. She's this older woman who runs estate sales. I asked if we could use hers. She said sure, then offered to watch with me. She didn't last long. The footage was black and white, shaky, filmed inside a dim room. The only light was a flickering CRT TV in the corner. The tape zoomed slowly toward the screen where someone, me or someone like me, was sitting in a chair. Still, unblinking. Zara's voice played over it. Barely a whisper. He wears your face until you forget what it looked like. The image flickered. A new face appeared. Mine again, but wrong. Skin too smooth. Eyes too big. Smiling like he didn't understand what smiling meant. My neighbor shut off the tape. She was pale. "That's not you," she said. I started reading about Capgras syndrome, a rare disorder where people believe someone close to them has been replaced by an imposter. But the more I read, the more I wondered, what if it works in reverse? What if your mind replaces someone who never existed? What if your brain creates a person-shaped placeholder just to fill the loneliness? I went to a psychiatrist. I told him everything. He nodded too slowly. His voice was calm, rehearsed. He told me what I wanted to hear. That trauma can invent memories. That love and grief can play dress-up in your head. That Zara might have been a delusion born out of isolation, screen addiction, parasocial hunger. I asked if hallucinations can leave physical evidence. He asked what I meant. I showed him the VHS. He smiled too wide. "You're almost rendered," he said. And then his face twitched, just slightly, like a corrupted video buffer. That night, I found a folder on my desktop I didn't create. Inside, over 100 stills, from different angles. All of them of me, sitting, sleeping, typing, all from webcam angles. In the last one, I'm not alone. Someone is behind me, touching my shoulder. She has Zara's smile, and my eyes. /update. I logged into Reddit this morning. There's a new subreddit in my list. r/HomeToPashore23, it only has one post. A live stream of me typing this. Story 3. Fair warning, I am not much of a writer. Hell, I ain't even much of a reader. But this is what happened. I live in a small town bordering the woods, and like most small towns, it's boring as hell. Almost nothing ever happens here, but when something does, almost everyone knows. Well, most of the time, anyway. I'm sure anyone else who lives in a community like mine can relate. It's generally filled with a few people who actively get things done and others who seem to exist solely to waste your time. Mostly, it's harmless, old ladies gossiping. Like, yes, Bertha, we all know June and Dave are getting divorced. And old men telling tall tales. No, Jim, you didn't see a 40-pointer 3 springs ago. No one recalls the most annoying man who ever lived here. Or at least they don't want to. I never claimed my time was all that valuable, but I still did my best to avoid getting caught up in all of it. Still, even I occasionally got roped into the latest town gossip or a well-spun yarn. But even the chattiest of Cathys avoided Frank. Frank was pleasant enough, aside from his droning voice and his uncanny ability to never talk about anything that ended with a point, or anything resembling reason. Conversations with him were a slow descent into endless nothingness. Once, he spent over an hour explaining the best way to make French toast, breaking down the process as if it were a life-altering discovery. By the time he was finished, the only thing he'd actually accomplished was making everyone wish they'd never eat French toast again. Frank was the epitome of normal. Like everyone in town, we thought we knew everything about him. not just his love of French toast. He lived alone at the edge of the woods, worked at the tire shop every day except Sunday, and never seemed to break from his routine. So when he was found dead in his bed, it came as a shock. The rumor mill went into full effect, but according to the coroner, Dave, it was anaphylaxis. "It's the most bumps I've seen on anyone," he said a little louder than intended. Then, in a hushed whisper, according to his medical records, he wasn't allergic to anything. He continued, "I spoke with the chief, and they didn't find anything that could have caused it. He pretty much only ate TV dinners, and they didn't find any pests or anything else that could have triggered the reaction. I should know a lot more when the toxicology reports come back." The reports were due back the following Tuesday. I knew something was up before I even hit Main Street. I could hear the murmurs, voices carrying in hushed tones. A random woman said matter-of-factly, "Well, at least she won't have to keep paying the lawyer." One man shook his head and proclaimed, "It's a damn shame." By the time I reached Main Street, it was clear Dave was dead, and no one knew how or why. I was hanging out near the barber shop when I overheard someone say he had bled out. But no cuts or slashes had been found, just the bumps. After Dave's death, time just sort of passed as normal. After the initial flood of rumors, the new coroner blamed it on mosquitoes and allergy medications, and town gossip returned to its usual routine. Who's been seen with who, and deer the size of mountains. Frank was mostly forgotten entirely until a family moved into his old home. I hear their kids get teased from time to time. "You know someone died in that house, right?" Now, Halloween was approaching, and every town needs a boogeyman, I guess. Nothing of note happened until spring. It started as a trickle, 1 or 2 people a day visiting the doctor, complaining about strange, itchy bumps. It never ramped up into something big. Maybe if it had, people would have actually paid attention. Each case was small, only 3 or 4 bumps at most. But the locations were bizarre, between the fingers, the bottom of the foot, right inside the edge of the nostril. I wasn't one of the first to experience it. I didn't believe it until it happened to me. Oh God, the itching. The fucking itching was unbearable. If I could have taken an acid bath and stripped my skin away, I would have. The only relief came at night when I took the dose the doctor had given me. At first, I hesitated. After everything that happened to Dave and Frank, who wouldn't? But doxylamine and diphenhydramine did the trick. It took 4 months for the damn bumps to finally disappear. The following spring, the bumps came back. But not everyone got them this time. I was one of the unlucky souls affected, but blessed to only have 1 on the sole of my foot. Others weren't so lucky. They ended up with 10 to 20 bumps spread out on one side of their bodies. The first to go missing disappeared about 2 weeks after the bumps started reappearing around town. It was one of the kids from Frank's house. We searched the woods, the town, called in volunteers from around the county, but not a trace of him. Sleeping 1 minute, gone the next. 2 days later, he was found screaming in the tree fort behind the house. His left leg was a bloody mess, skin and flesh scraped down to the shin bone. His fingernails broken and missing on both hands. To this day, the kid hasn't spoken. He's been in and out of mental health facilities ever since. Word around the barbershop is that when he's alone, he has a habit of going busy constantly. After that, I'm sure deadbolt sales at the hardware store shot up, but it didn't matter. 2 days after he was found, the next person disappeared. By then, rumors had stopped flying. No one lingered on Main Street anymore. People went to work or school and then went straight home. The next poor victim was a waitress from the diner. She was working a late shift, but something happened between the last customer leaving and when she should have locked up, because locking up never happened. She was missing for 2 days before they found her, halfway to the next town. Her back was a mess. Her shirt was torn to shreds, along with the skin beneath it. It looked like she had slid on her back, all the way from our town to the next. But later, we found out her lower back had never touched the pavement. The bumps were still there. Shortly after her release, she left town, never to return. No one is sure what happened while she was missing. Next was Gary from the hardware store. I guess even with all the money he made selling deadbolts, the poor son of a bitch never thought to install one himself. It was the same pattern as before. He went missing. We searched, and 2 days later, he was found. They had to take him to the city hospital for reconstructive surgery. When they found him, his eyelids were swollen shut. He wasn't sure where he was or how long he'd been locked in the back room of the hardware store. The poor guy had gouged his own eyes out. He doesn't remember much, but he does remember the buzzing, the incessant, gnawing sound that never stopped. A while later, a hunter from a few towns over went missing. During the search for him, police uncovered a storm cellar in a burnout shack. Inside, they found a bunk, a table, and a wood fire stove. Among the collected items was Gary's ID. At some point during the investigation, the place somehow went up in flames. Police reported finding syringes filled with doxylamine, diphenhydramine, and D7 proteins. They believe it burned so fast because the rags were soaked in brake fluid. Despite everything, the hunter was not found anywhere near the shack. When they finally located him, far from town, he was alive. No bumps. It's been years since it all happened, but today on the news I heard the state will be introducing UVL sprays to control the bugs. I also found a bump, and man, does it itch to the bone. You'd think with everything that's happened, the creep in the cellar would be the most annoying person in town. But no, that was still Frank. Fuck Frank. Story 4. Back when I was 14 years old, my family had moved from our home in England to the Republic of Ireland, where we lived for a further 6 years. We had first moved to the northwest of the country, but after a year of living there, we then relocated to the Irish Midlands, as my dad had gotten a new job working in the city. My parents had bought a cottage on the outskirts of a very small village that was a stopping point from one of the larger towns to the next. This village was so small and remote, there was basically nothing to do. But not long after moving here and taking to exploring the surrounding area with my border collie, Maisie, I eventually found a large stretch of bogland containing a man-made forest. Every weekend or half-term away from school, I took to walking this area with my dog, in which I would follow along a railway line used for transporting peat. However, after months of trekking this very same bogland, I eventually stopped going there. I can't quite recall the reason why, but maybe it was because I always felt as though I was trespassing, which I wasn't, or because the bogland was so bumpy and uneven, I always came home with horrific blisters. Although I stopped going to this bogland to walk my dog, outside one of the nearby towns where I went to school, there was a public forest. Because this forest was a 20-minute drive away, my dad would take me and Maisie there, drop us off, and then pick us up again 2 or 3 hours later. What I loved about these woods was that it was always quiet, only with the occasional family, dog walker, or jogger passing us by. On one particular evening, I had gone back to these woods with Maisie, where my dad would later pick us up after running some errands. Making our way along the trail, the evening had already started to dimmer. Wanting to make my way back to the car park before it got too dark, I decided to take a shortcut through the forest via one of the many narrow side trails. Following down one of these side trails, me and Maisie stumbled upon a small teepee-shaped hut made from logs. Loving a good game of hide and seek, I would sometimes hide inside this teepee when Maisie wasn't looking, where she would spend the next couple of minutes circling around the hut trying to find me, not realizing she could just go inside. Whether I played this game with Maisie that day, I'm not sure, but following down this exact same side trail, I turn to look behind me. Staring down the entryway, I then see a man walking 20 meters behind, having just taken this side trail. For some unknown reason, I had a strange instant feeling about this man, even though I had only just noticed him. I can't remember or even describe the way this man was walking, but the way he did so felt suspicious to me. Listening to my instincts, or perhaps just my paranoia, I quickly latched my lead back onto Maisie and hurriedly make my way down the trail. A few minutes later, although I had reached back onto the main trail, the evening had already turned much darker. Again, turning to see if the man was behind me, I could still see him around the curve, only 10 meters away from me now. I did try to tell myself I was just being paranoid, and this man was most likely not following me, but my gut instinct still told me something was off. Thinking ahead, I pull out my phone to call my dad, as to make sure he was already in the car park waiting for me. But there was no answer. Because there was no answer, I just assumed he was probably still driving, and because he was still driving, I just hoped my dad was nearly on his way. By the time I make it back to the car park, it was basically pitch black by now, and there was just one single car in the parking area, but it wasn't my dad's. Sitting down by a picnic bench to wait for him to come and get us, all I could do was hope he would be coming soon and that this strange man from the woods was not following me after all. Only a minute or two later, I could hear the footsteps of this very same man approaching through the darkness. Anxiously anticipating him pass by, I try to distract myself on my phone, or at least make myself seem less approachable. Thankfully enough, the man just walks completely by me. Entering the car park, the man then gets in his vehicle, the only car in the car park, but he doesn't drive away. He just stays there, sat inside his car with both the engine and headlights turned on. 20 minutes must have gone by, but my dad still wasn't here. And yet this very same stranger was. Trying to call and text my dad to say I was waiting for him, I was met with no answer. While I continued waiting, I tried to rationalize why this man hadn't decided to drive off. Whatever reasons I came up with, they were not very convincing for me. And for those whole 20, or however many more minutes, I sat outside those woods in complete darkness, hearing nothing but the hum of this stranger's engine among the silent night air. What made this situation even more anxiety-inducing was that my dog Maisie had been endlessly whining by my feet, scraping dirt away beneath the bench to make a surprisingly deep hole. Maisie was in general a very nervous dog and basically whined at everything, but perhaps she too felt as though something about this situation wasn't right. Thankfully, after what felt far longer than 20 minutes, the strange man, already with his engine and headlights on, reverses from his parking spot, exits out of the car park and onto the main road, leaving me and Maisie in peace. Although we were now alone, basically stranded outside of a dark forest, I couldn't help but feel a huge sigh of relief come over me. My dad did eventually come and get us, 10 minutes after the man had finally decided to drive off. Do you want to know what my dad's excuse was as to why he was so late? He forgot he had to pick us up. I don't know if that man really was following me through the forest, and I definitely don't know why he just sat in his car for 20 minutes. But if I had to learn anything from that experience, it would be the following. 1. My dad can sometimes be a careless douche. And 2. Never hike through the forest alone, late in the evening. Story 5. I'm writing this and my hands are shaking, and I don't know where or how to start. I'm not an internet guy or into posts. I'm a taxi driver just getting by, living day by day, and making a living isn't easy. But what happened to me, I don't know how to describe it. Something stranger than fiction and more terrifying than any movie I've ever seen in my life. I'm telling this here because I honestly don't know why. Maybe to warn someone, maybe so someone will believe me, maybe so my conscience can rest a little before I don't know what might happen. I won't say my name or where I am now, because I'm scared. Truly scared. The story began a few days ago, maybe a week, maybe 10 days. Time is blurred for me. It was an ordinary night like any other. Few customers, hot weather, and you're just struggling to make enough for gas and the car rental. I was parked in a somewhat deserted spot, waiting for any fare to break the boredom. It was nearing 1 in the morning. Suddenly, I saw someone waving at me from a distance. He looked a bit strange, tall and thin, wearing ordinary clothes, but they looked like they weren't his, a bit loose on him, and his eyes were frighteningly empty. Like he was looking through you, not at you. I thought, come on, any fare will do. I stopped for him. He opened the door next to me and sat down. He didn't even return my greeting. He was quiet for a moment, and I waited for him to tell me where he wanted to go. Nothing. I looked at him in the rearview mirror, found him staring straight ahead, completely zoned out. I said to him, "Sir, where to?" He looked at me slowly, as if turning his neck required immense effort. His voice was low and strange, like someone who hadn't spoken in a long time. "Drive." I was surprised. "Drive? Drive where?" "I need a destination, boss." His eyes went back to staring straight ahead. "Just drive. Anywhere." I thought to myself, this guy looks like he's high on something or crazy. But still, money is money. And the customer looked like he'd pay well. Maybe he wasn't from around here or was lost. I decided to drive him around a bit until he made up his mind, or maybe he was waiting for a phone call or something. I turned on the meter and drove. I entered a quiet side street. The car moved slowly, and silence filled the space. I'm used to this silence, but with this customer, the silence was heavy. Very heavy. I felt like there was a mountain sitting next to me, not a human being. Every now and then, I'd glance in the mirror and find him in the same state, staring ahead coldly, his eyes unblinking like a statue. After about 10 minutes, while we were on another side street, a bit narrower and brighter than the last one, I suddenly saw him slowly raise his right hand and point at a man walking on the opposite sidewalk. The man looked completely ordinary, maybe heading home from work, walking with a bag in his hand. The passenger pointed at him with his index finger without uttering a word. And suddenly, the man on the sidewalk fell flat on his face, all at once, like a stage prop. The bag in his hand burst open, and its contents scattered on the ground. I slammed on the brakes out of shock. The car shuddered to a halt. I looked at the passenger in disbelief. What was that? That man fell. Did you see? He was completely unfazed. Didn't take his eyes off the fallen man. Soon, I saw people gathering around the man, and the sound of screaming started to rise. Someone yelled, "Ambulance! Someone call an ambulance!" My heart was pounding like a drum. I looked at the passenger again and saw him lower his hand with utmost calm, then look straight ahead again as if nothing had happened. "Sir, do you know that man?" I asked him in a shaky voice. He didn't answer. "Sir, I'm talking to you." He cut me off with the same low, terrifying voice. "Drive." I felt a chill run down my entire body. This wasn't normal. What was wrong with this man? And what was this bizarre coincidence? He points at someone, and they fall? No, this wasn't a coincidence. My mind refused to believe there was a connection, but my gut told me no, something was wrong. Very wrong. I told myself, "Man, calm down. Maybe the man was sick. Maybe he fainted. It's a coincidence, man." I tried hard to convince myself. I stepped on the gas and drove off, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror, watching the spot where the man fell and the crowd gathering around him. We continued driving in an even heavier silence. This time, I couldn't take my eyes off him in the mirror. I watched his every move with fear. He remained perfectly still. Another 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I don't remember. I entered a slightly busy main street. Cars were moving slowly, side by side. Suddenly, he made the same gesture again. He raised his right hand, but this time he pointed at the driver of a transport truck driving next to us. The driver was a young guy, playing loud music and singing along. The passenger pointed at him. A second, two. The truck next to us suddenly swerved sharply to the right, as if the driver had lost consciousness, and crashed into a car parked on the side of the road. The sound of the crash was incredibly loud, and the whole street came to a standstill. My entire body jolted. I looked at the truck, saw the driver's head slumped over the steering wheel, motionless. People started shouting and running towards the accident. I turned to the passenger, feeling the blood drain from my face. "You, what did you do? What are you doing?" My voice was loud this time, and I couldn't control it. He looked at me with the same coldness, that deadly coldness, and said one sentence. He chose. Chose what? What are you talking about? Do you have something to do with what's happening? He looked straight ahead again. Drive. This time I was truly scared. Not just anxious or bewildered. This was real fear. This man wasn't a normal human being. There was something demonic about him. Coincidence doesn't repeat itself twice in exactly the same way. He points, and people fall or have terrible accidents. No, not fall. I saw the first man, and I saw this driver. They looked dead. I thought about opening the door, throwing myself out of the car and running. I thought about stopping the car, yelling, and drawing people's attention to him. But fear paralyzed me. Fear of the unknown. Fear of him. If he could do that to people on the street with a gesture, what would he do to me if I disobeyed his command? I kept driving, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I didn't know where I was going. I entered streets I didn't recognize, lost like a ship without a sail. And he sat silently beside me. His silence now had a sound, a threatening sound, a sound that said every second passing with him in this car was bringing me closer to disaster. After a while, I don't know how long, maybe half an hour, maybe more, we were in a dimly lit working-class neighborhood, the houses packed tightly together. The streets barely wide enough for one car. There was an old woman walking alone on the side of the road, holding a cane and leaning on it. She looked so frail and poor. My heart clenched as I saw him begin to raise his hand again. I told myself no, not her too. She's an old, poor woman. Before he could point, before I could think what to do, I yelled loudly while looking at him in the mirror. Watch it out. Don't you do it. Not this woman. His hand stopped in midair for a moment. He looked at me again. This time, I felt like there was a flicker. I don't know what. Maybe surprise? Maybe something else I couldn't decipher in those empty eyes. He asked in that low voice that terrified me. Are you afraid for her? She's an old, poor woman. Have mercy. Why are you doing this? Who are you anyway? I was speaking quickly, fear making it hard to form coherent sentences. He kept looking at me for a bit. Then he slowly lowered his hand and went back to looking straight ahead. Drive. I felt myself breathing again, though with difficulty. The old woman continued on her way, oblivious to everything. We passed her. I kept driving, but this time I kept circling the same area, not wanting to go far, as if trying to prevent him from finding a new prey. I kept driving around for about another hour. He was silent, and I kept glancing at him and at the street, my heart in my throat, until I got fed up, tired, and my fear reached its peak. I stopped the car suddenly in a dark, empty spot, turned off the engine, and turned my whole body towards him. Look, I'm not moving another step until I understand. Who are you? And what are you doing to these people? What's your story exactly? He remained silent for a few moments, staring ahead. I felt like my heart would stop from the tension. Then he looked at me, but this time his gaze was different, as if a piece of the mask he wore had been removed. I sensed a look of sadness, or maybe exhaustion. I don't know. He said with a strange calmness, I see. See what? I see what they've done. I see the mark on them. Mark? What mark is this? I started to feel like my head would explode from the questions and the horror. Every one of us has a mark, like a halo. Its color tells what they've done in their life. Done good or done evil. The words weren't registering. Halos? Colors? This was crazy talk. What are you saying? Are you insane? I'm not insane, he said with the same calmness. I really see it. This halo tells me everything. There are white halos, pure. Those are good, peaceful people. And there are gray halos, those who sinned and repented, or whose lives are half and half. And there are black halos. When he said black, I felt his voice change. There was a tone of hatred, or perhaps disgust. He continued, these black halos belong to people who have truly harmed others. People who destroyed others' lives. People who stole, killed, oppressed. People who don't deserve to walk the earth among the good. I swallowed hard. And those people you pointed at, their halos were black? He nodded slowly. The darkest shades of black. People who did things you can't imagine. And you, when you point at them, what happens to them? I asked the question knowing the answer, but needing to hear it from him. Their halo goes out, like a bulb burning out, and their soul leaves their body. He said it so simply, as if talking about the weather. I felt the world spin around me. This man wasn't just someone seeing strange things. He was judging people and carrying out the sentence himself. An angel of death walking on two legs? A devil? I didn't know. But what I was sure of was that he was dangerous. Very dangerous. So what about me? The words escaped me involuntarily. I don't know why I asked. Maybe morbid curiosity? Maybe terror? He looked at me again. This time his eyes stayed focused on me for a long time. I felt like he was piercing me with his gaze, like he was flipping through all the pages of my past life. I felt a coldness seep into my bones despite the heat outside. You? He repeated the word softly. Yes, me. What color halo do you see on me? I asked, instantly regretting every letter I uttered. A faint but terrifying smile touched his lips for the first time. It was the ugliest smile I had ever seen in my life. Your halo, he said, leaning slightly towards me, his voice dropping to a whisper. Your halo is blacker than night, blacker than the devil's own heart. One of the worst halos I've ever seen in my life. In that instant, I lost control. All I remember is opening the car door and throwing myself out while it was still stopped. I ran as fast as I could, without looking back. I could feel his gaze on my back, feel his voice echoing in my ears. Blacker than night. I kept running and running until my legs couldn't carry me anymore. I ducked into unfamiliar streets and alleys until I found myself somewhere very far away. I took whatever public transport I could find and went to a distant place, a place where no one knows me. I left the car, left everything. I'm sitting now in a cheap hotel room writing this. Why did he say that to me? Why is my halo specifically so black? There's something that happened a long time ago. Many years ago, I was still a reckless young man, needing money. I did something terrible, something I regret every single day of my life. A crime. I was involved in it. A kidnapping a little girl. Things got out of control, and the girl died. And me, and the others with me, we got rid of her. Threw her body somewhere no one would ever find it. Nobody knows about this except me and the two guys who were with me. And neither of them will talk. I've lived all these years with this secret, with this guilt. Try to live normally, trying to forget. But it seems this guilt leaves a mark that can't be erased. A mark this man was able to see. He knows. That man knows what I did. And when he told me my halo was blacker than night, he wasn't just threatening me. He was telling me my turn was coming. That he was going to cleanse the world of me too. I don't know what to do. Turn myself in? Would they believe me if I told them about the man with the halos? They'd call me crazy. And if I don't tell them, will I live the rest of my life in this terror? Waiting any moment to find him in front of me, pointing his finger and my halo going out? Why did I write all this? Maybe to confess. Maybe so if something happens to me, someone will know the truth. The truth about what I did back then, and the truth about this terrifying man walking our streets, judging people. If any of you see a tall, thin man with empty eyes walking alone at night, run. Run and don't let him get close to you. And don't let him see your halo. I don't know what I'll do now. Keep running? Until when? Can he find me? Could he be looking for me right now as I write this? Oh God, protect me. I'm scared. So scared. Someone help me. Someone tell me what to do. I feel like my end is near. I feel like he's going to find me. That's it for today's creepy Reddit tales. Before we go, I just want to say a quick thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and sticking around. You guys keep this channel going, and I'll be back soon with more stories that'll make your skin crawl. Drop a comment if you've got your own spooky tale to share, and I'll see you in the next one.